Welcome, listening audience and viewing audience. If you're watching us live or on the YouTubes, are there more than one YouTube? Just one, right? Just one tube. It's for you, though. It's a YouTube. Thanks for streaming us or downloading us or wherever you may be listening, however you may be listening, to steal from Colin Coward. This is the Walk the Talk America Guns and Mental Health podcast. Today we're joined by Clint Macro and Matt Mallory of Meet the Pressers. Gentlemen, it's an honor and a pleasure. It's nice to see you both, and excited to discuss a whole wide-ranging variety of things. Joined by Mike Sedini down in Vegas. Hi, buddy.
What's going on, Clint, Matt? Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. It's always a pleasure to cohabitate the meat space or the physical space with you guys. Jake, this is the first time I've met you, I believe. Thank you for having us on.
Meat space sounds like something I'll be doing with regard to grilling this evening or something.
It's interesting you say that. When you do voice to text and you say meet the pressers, it comes out MEATDEPRESSORS, which is an entirely different show.
Doesn't get it right.
That is not available on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of it. Is that like a meat tenderizer, or is that like a tongue depressor made out of meat, or or does it make you depressed? I mean, it's a mental health show. Are we talking about like how depressing it is not to have meat? Because that'd be pretty upsetting in my realm.
Right.
Yeah. Speaking of the show, like, why don't you guys give us the history of how you started and kind of your journey through the thing? I mean, because I consider you guys like OGs. You've been around forever, right? Like,
stop. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I guess back in the day, I had a little audio podcast with one of my former employees that was working for me. He decided to take a job close to where he lived, and Clinton was hosting UTM down in PA for their instructor class. I went down, and Clint's like, "How's the show going?" And I was like, but he actually collabed and gave me a lot of information on audio and video equipment, and did the voiceover, or worked on getting the voiceover done. And yeah, I was like, well, it's on the back burner. And Clint's like, sounds like you need a co-host. And I was like, you interested? And that was the beginning of it. That was February 7 years ago. February
7, yeah, something like this. It's been 7 years, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. And then April,
wow.
by April we had a website and a new name, and we just been running. And
if we were a Star Trek sequel, this would be our last season, because they all go 7 years, and that's kind of how it works. Yeah, he had his show, and I made him this really, really kick-ass intro that had like his logo on fire and stuff like that with original music. And like, I don't even think you maybe used it once, and then your show kind of stopped. I'm like, what are you doing, man? You invested all that time, effort, and energy. Like, you should be doing this. And at the time, one of my mentors, Pincus, was like saying, hey, you need to do a podcast. You should be on camera. And I was doing videos for a couple different organizations at the time. And so it seemed like a natural fit. So luckily, Matt already had a little bit of a following already that just kind of transferred over into that. And it's taken us years to build folks up. But I tell you what, guys, being that you have us on your show right now, I guarantee that your followers will go up at least 5, maybe 6.
I thought you guarantee we're done in 2 years, but that'll be 7 years for us. Matt, what was the name of the original show then? It wasn't.
No, it was the PS and Ed show. And Clint's like, it can't be your name. So then we kind of made it a hodgepodge, more like his name. But if you look at the logo, the left side of the logo is his, right side of the logo is mine. And then everything has my name first, because the name of the show kind of leans, Meet the Pressers and then Trigger Pressers Union. So they kind of are, similar. And I'll talk to people and be like, oh yeah, I always watch Trigger Pressers Union. I'm like, you mean Meet the Pressers? And they're like, oh yeah, that too.
Yeah. So we decide everything, like on all of our stuff, it's Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Clint Macro. So we put Matt's name first because arguably the title is a little more trigger pressy than it is PS and Eddie.
Fair enough. Well, let's talk about how you guys got into this in the first place. I know you're both instructors, but there's more to it than that. So whoever wants to go first, if there's a coin to flip, you can flip it.
Yeah, I guess, my background, just growing up in upstate New York, pushing deer, had my first BB gun. I'm still trying to figure out what year it was, but had my first BB gun when I was a young lad. And then I went into the military and got out of the military, taught classes, technology classes. Then I had people wanting me to teach them how to shoot, got certified NRA, USCCA, all that, New York State Hunter Ed. Then started teaching the class locally to the different counties in the state, and just kept growing, and then adding more instructor certification, then senior training counselor and master instructor and Sabre and Taser and USCCA and NRA and UTM. And it just kept growing and growing. And all those times, just like Clint said, I had people saying, "Oh, your classes are great. You should really like have a show, or you should take bits of your classes and put it on the internet for the masses to see." And I'm like, yeah, I wish I had time for that. And then, and that, honestly, that's why I put the PS and Ed show on the back burner, because I just, there's not enough to be able to do it. And you guys know, I mean, there's two of you right here, right? You got a guy behind the scenes. It's hard to do it on your own and do everything else you're doing. Where if you have other people that are there and motivate you, like Clint motivates me, and they're the yin of your yang. Clint is, being able to make sure that certain things don't fall through the cracks, and he's better at some things, I'm better at others, and we kind of help each other out there. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and especially, we have some fantastic sponsors, and their financial input certainly helps to lessen the burn when we go to like annual meeting or to SHOT Show or something like that. Certainly helps to defer costs, but ultimately, man, running a show like this just is a huge commitment of time. So, unfortunately, one of the things that's done is we try to put out a show every, our frequency is not always the most consistent, which is unfortunate, but sometimes Matt or I will both be on the road for like weeks to teaching classes. And, so we've done plenty of episodes where I'm coming to you live from a seedy motel in the middle of nowhere and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, my story is similar to Matt's, as far as all the organizations that I've achieved certification from and things like that. But I've been around guns my whole life. It was like, I honestly don't recall when that 22 got leaned in the corner of my bedroom. Like, I always had that 22 rifle there, and just guns are part of the culture where I grew up in north central Pennsylvania, and spent a lot of time in the music and film industry. And when I was in Los Angeles, I just kind of fell into teaching. My dear friend was an armorer, and he would actually do it right. And he would, adapt the guns to be on set and showed Christian Bale how to hold a carbine so he looked right and that kind of stuff. And so I started going to the range with him, helping actors and mostly girlfriends that he would bring to the range. And he says, "Hey, you got a knack for teaching." I'm like, so I found an NRA training counselor, also happened to be a recording engineer. So we kind of hit it off. But, like so many people, I had the patch, the NRA instructor patch, and I really didn't teach the class that often. It was kind of like, yeah, I'm an instructor. It's kind of what people do, and they take people to the range and show them how to grip a gun. But when I moved back to Pennsylvania, I started doing it like really, really regularly and getting a lot of people through. And I was teaching at the time, it was more like just safe gun handling and just hitting the target and putting little holes in the target. That was pretty much like my motivation. Because, I came from like, hey, everyone loves to shoot, man. Woohoo, we're going to range. Let's be better at it. And after one class, this woman came up while I was cleaning up, and she came and gave me a hug. And she says, thanks to what you showed me, I will never be victimized again. And it was like, pow, like I really didn't understand the level of responsibility I had, and that I was servicing my fellow Americans in a way that I didn't really realize that I was doing by helping empower them to take on that responsibility to protect themselves and those that they love. And that's when I really kind of shifted my mindset around, started the Trigger Presses Union, and Divine Intervention dropping like a bunch of baskets into my lap. That's when I really first started reading Pincus's books. I came in contact with the USCCA's material, which are all like defense. That's what they're all about. And that began my like second evolution. And through that, I kind of feel like God puts you doors in front of you. You walk past them. Sometimes you peek, and sometimes he kicks your ass right through one. And here I am today. So I really take great pride in the type of instruction that we offer. Matt and I are defensive instructors that just so happen to teach guns. That defensive mindset, that want to take on that responsibility to be empowered to do so and protect your family is huge. And that could be done with a gun. It is the most efficient tool of self-defense, devised by man, but also pepper spray or nothing, just smart wits and a little verbal judo is going to help keep people better protected against those opportunistic criminals.
Do you do weaponless defense also, or is it all guns now?
Matt does a lot more DT, defensive tactics than I do, but there's a few little moves that I show in some of the pepper spray classes that just kind of give people a taste and give them something better than like, oh, what do I do here? But most of, all of the curriculum really goes towards helping people to understand if we can keep our eyes open and make smart decisions about where we go and what we do, we're less likely to be in those situations where we might need to use any of those tools. And if we are left with no other choice but to use a tool, we're probably better equipped to articulate why it was reasonable and more likely to be able to win that legal aftermath. So, the defensive plan has to incorporate all of those things because, it'd be horrible to do everything you can, successfully defend your family, and then have to sell your house to, go to court so that they ultimately put you in jail anyhow. Yeah. So, we want people to really understand that there's those damages that need to be compensated for too. But Matt does a lot more like handsy, kung fu-y kind of stuff. That's not really my wheelhouse, but I can show a few moves. At least give them something to kind of pull out of their Rolodex if they ever are in the arms of someone that they don't want to be in.
Yeah, I'm glad you said what you just said there, because I feel like, especially, we're on the Mental Health and Guns podcast, right? And one of the things that, coming into the firearms industry, and I was like super green. I had nothing. Like I did not grow up around firearms, and I didn't really understand the importance of the second. There was just so much stuff that I had to learn on the job, but thank God I was just around such responsible people. I started to realize, I'm like, man, gun people are super into safety. There's, there was never accidents, any of the ranges I was on. And then also just being cognizant of, you can't just shoot somebody, right? I learned that when I first got in the firearms industry, that was something that was just beaten into everybody's head. Defensive shooting, you have to understand the law, blah, 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 blah. Right. And then, now we're kind of pushing and changing the culture to make gun owners understand that guns and mental health aren't mutually exclusive. Right. I feel like that's the third part of the plan. Safety, understanding a firearm, knowing when you can use it, understanding law, and then having a plan for maybe, the enemy in here or this neighborhood, and I really feel like the firearms community, once we add that, we're really coming together as I don't know, the perfect robot, you know what I mean? And that's, sure. I think the majority of gun owners. And that's where I think we have the issue when we fight so many people out, everybody that just wants to get rid of guns in the anti-gun crowd, not understanding how much into safety we are. They paint us as this, we don't care. And all we want to do is harm people. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, far from it. And the work you guys have done with Walk Talk America have really opened people's eyes up to, it's showing people who aren't in the gun space, if that's really a thing, showing them that the vast majority of gun owners are very responsible and think the way that you just explained. But also, we talk about those damages that we want people to help to, kind of come up with a plan to deal with if they, as a family first responder, knowing that you have someone that you can go talk to and seek counseling from, finding a pro-gun clinical psychologist that they can speak to now, have a meeting with, do a baseline so they know who you are, so you know who they are, that you could maybe go back to them if you are troubled for, any reason, but especially if you use a firearm to defend yourself, likely there's going to be that moral and emotional aftermath that folks will have to deal with. Matt, I'm sure can speak to it personally. I know he's had some of himself and some of his students have issues, but we had talked about, we had Thomas Yoxel. I don't know if you're familiar with Thomas Yoxel. His story is very powerful, and he was on episode, he's in season 2 of our show. But anyhow, he explained basically a dynamic critical incident that he was involved in, and he came to the aid of a police officer that was recorded on dash camera, and never was the incident questioned legally. It was never once. He never worried about going to jail. He did everything right. He saved that police officer's life. But to hear him explain how he completely undervalued that emotional damage after the fact and how it affected him in his life, he said he never considered it. And so a lot of times when we have this discussion, of course, I introduce people to Walk the Talk America. I hand out your bracelets in pretty much all my classes, but also, to share that story with them, because you got to think about that. Do you have a plan to deal with that? Do you have someone that you can talk to that, can maybe help you in those moments? And if you're under criminal investigation, you have someone you can talk to that, you're not going to get in trouble for talking to them, kind of a situation like that too. So there's a lot of nuance there. But
That's a
hey,
great. Oh
we-
yeah, go ahead. Keep
I'm
going.
sorry.
Keep
We just take on such a great deal of responsibility when we want to be family first responders. But it's right and just that we do so, because even well-intended government most likely is not going to get there in time, and in many cases they're not even going to answer the phone. Hundreds of thousands of 911 calls go unanswered every year, and so it's prudent that we take on that responsibility.
We're police are the cleanup crew. We show up after the crabs hit the fan, and Masad Ayub says it well, as far as the mark of Cain, how your friends and family will disown you, your friends and family will distance themselves from you, and you will have sleepless nights. And, I call it the four horses of your apocalypse. That comes from after interviewing George Zimmerman back in 2018 in the article I wrote in 2019. You're going to go through criminal, civil, mental, and jury of public opinion. And a lot of people don't take into consideration all that other stuff. Really have to have your mind set around, okay, yeah, I might be in the right. The law says I can, but that doesn't mean I must. And there's other things at stake here other than just the simple, criminal aspect of it.
There's a really important concept that I center on quite frequently, and it's become my favorite word. I used to say it's my favorite word in counseling, but now it's my favorite word in total, and it's intentionality. It's the spirit of knowing why you do what you do. And if you can have good intentionality at all times, which does take rehearsal, by the way, you have to practice this, then you can be in charge of your decisions, your behaviors, your responses in such a manner that if anybody were watching on film and they pressed pause and asked you what you were doing, you could give an answer. And I think if we forward think about what we're doing when we're carrying a gun in public, what we're anticipating, we also have to think multiple steps down the field as well to say, if the worst thing happens and I come out, then what else, right? And I think very rarely do we talk about the emotional, psychological, mental damage that happens after a critical incident. And I've worked with cops and firefighters too, and they're like, yeah, we get trained in the academy, and I know because I've done some of that training. It's like it doesn't quite ever really prepare you in the scenarios and the evaluations in the academy in the artificial environment. And so we can run through, rolling around on the ground, shooting around barrels, putting holes in paper, but nothing really ever prepares you for the actual moment except for mental preparation. So we take a lot of time, in this organization talking about suicide prevention, responsibly storing firearms so that they're not accessible to people who are going to do weird things with them. We talk about taking care of yourself so that you don't slide into that place of despondency. But there's this whole defense community out there, right? That I think that needs equal attention, and we need to get into the instructors' classrooms and say, hey, look, the best way to mitigate trauma is to pretend that you've already been through it so that your brain doesn't go into full-blown shock when and if that moment happens. And it doesn't even have to deal with discharging of a firearm. It could just be being approached on the street and having to reveal your concealed firearm and get the bad guy to go away. And then you're still up sleepless nights after that because you were threatened. Your family was threatened. Like it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, when you think about any kind of altercation you get in with anybody, even if it's just an argument with your spouse or a friend, that plagues you. Like, how dare they say that? I can't believe they said that to me. Who do they think they are? And that it just keeps going over and over in your head until time and maybe sometimes a little bit of counseling helps it go away. And then next thing you know, you see the person again, or they say something. Oh, that's right. I can't believe right. And you're back at it again. So it's this repetitive cycle. I like to say it's like that favorite song you can't get out of your head. Right, baby shark, do, right? And now it's going to be
whoa. Yeah. What new pussycat will kill baby shark any day of the week?
That's true. That's good.
Every time I see a shark vacuum cleaner, by the way, I have to go vacuum shark.
Vacuum shark. Vacuum shark 5,000. Yeah. So I mean, we don't really know physically, psychologically, physiologically, mentally. We really have no idea what we're going to do in a dynamic critical incident. And even those folks that are a little more like acclimated to violence, like special teams guys and stuff like that, they still will articulate that every situation is unique. But I think it's prudent that we expect the absolute worst. Let's prepare for the absolute worst. Let's prepare for the DA throws the book at me. The jury is all filled with anti-gun people. The prosecutor is vehemently anti-gun. During the event, I'm shitting in my pants and I don't know what my name is. I'm shaking uncontrollably. and I'm under like 10 layers of clothes like that. And we should also assume that at the end of it, we're going to be completely despondent and really not be able to deal with it mentally. That's what we should approach it as, because as you said, essentially the body has a hard time going where the mind hasn't been. If our preparation is at that end of the extreme, which, may or may not happen, there's no way to predict that. But if we're anywhere this side of the extreme, then I think we're just better equipped to deal with it. And at least we'll have the infrastructure in place that will set us up for success, or the best chance of success.
I always like to say it, it's tools on your tool belt. The more training you have, good quality training, obviously not always YouTube University, but good quality
There are
training.
some good things on YouTube, dude.
That is true. Very true.
Walk the Talk America Guns and Mental Health podcast, for example.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. That good training that you have in your tool belt, hopefully it's the good training kicks in when you need it to. It's it. There's no rocket science behind it. There's no, there's no superheroes, anything like that. If a bad guy has a good day and I have a bad day, I can be beat just like anybody else. It's just simple as that. Be nice to people, try to understand everybody has bad moods, and, you're in a good mood. Don't let their bad mood get you, and don't go back at them with what they're coming at with you, because next thing you know, it's a tit for a tat and somebody might be pulling out a gun or a knife.
Let me ask this, because I haven't asked it actually of too many people. Usually I just either sit through the course or the conversation doesn't go here. How do you guys push your students into that place of disequilibrium, mentally, neurologically, physically in some cases, so that their brains can be better adapted to the extreme environment? And I don't mean like temperature, but like, the extreme stress environment of a critical incident or an attack. How do you do that in the classroom setting?
Sure. You want to take this to start? You want me to go? Well, Matt will talk about doing a lot of like force on role player, force on force kind of stuff. And he does a lot more of that than I do. I just don't have the opportunity to do so currently with what I've been teaching recently. But I like to incorporate a lot of decision making. Too often, especially in gun classes, the instructor will lead with, "Hey, we're just making the assumption it's justified to do so." And so essentially you're developing a stimulus response pattern of you hear this sound or this word, and then you shoot the piece of paper in front of you. And it removes the possibility of target identification, of de-escalation, of no-shoot scenarios. So I really like to use a simple concept of visualization. So we'll discuss, what is a behavior that us in this range right now might deem as reasonable to use a gun to stop? Well, what if they're, stabbing my wife? Okay. What if they're stealing my child? Okay. We kind of talk about that, and implicitly we're kind of talking about some legal stuff there, but ultimately, okay, that piece of paper is not a piece of paper. I need you to visualize and imagine they are doing that thing we just discussed. And the moment you recognize they stop doing that thing, then stop pressing your trigger. And so we'll start with that. And then I'll put up multiple targets of different shapes and colors. And even though, they may not be like evil looking people with big teeth and claws, they're different targets. And now I'll give sometimes confusing range commands so that they have to find it, look at it, figure it out, and then engage the target. And then we talk about, why did you shoot that target? Well, you said green and that one is green, and therefore I shot the green target. Okay. Going back to a concept that Massad Ayoob always talks about, and it's, can you articulate? Is there a good reason you did what you just did? And I try to really push that kind of stuff. And then ultimately at the end of class, if time provides, all teaching's a balance of content and time monkey. So if I got a longer class, I'll generally incorporate some type of simulation where it's a one-on-one thing and I'm in their ear kind of narrating the situation. And, it's typically on a square range with pieces of paper on the target. So there has to be a fair bit of intellectual buy-in to really gain value out of it. But most times, man, people like, okay, you're looking down your hallway, you see this, and I try to make it as personalized as I can, because by that time I maybe know a little bit more about the student. And by walking them through that and then having them at the end debrief on it, why did you do what you do? Well, I could see he was standing right next to my child's bedroom. He turned with the gun towards us and he started kicking the door. Like sometimes people really, really get into that. And the imagination is so powerful. You know, having come from the music and film industry, like I can make most people cry with a certain combination of piano notes at the top of the register, and that happens all the time. It's kind of psyops, really. But if we can get people to buy into that, then they get much more value. Then I recommend they go and watch like Active Self-Protection, or the whole host of resources we have to actually see video evidence, surveillance evidence of different dynamic critical incidents. And then I tell them to turn the sound off. Not that I have anything against John Correa or anything like that. It shows great, but John's going to direct you what to look at. So I want them to look at, hey, I want you to watch the video 3 times and tell me what the bad guy's doing. Let's start to recognize bad guy behavior. What does it look like when someone lifts up a shirt and starts to grab a gun? And then look at the background. What does it look like when people are sitting there, have a sandwich, and all of a sudden gunshots go off? What do they do? Some people just kind of go like this, and others go like this, and others take off running. So then I charge them with using that to visualize on the range next time they go. And then that way their visualization is a little more accurate, for lack of a better term. And I'm a big proponent of putting people into video simulators. The video simulators like the TI system, the Milo range, there's a lot of ranges around that have those. And quite frankly, most ranges, they turn it on once a year and they don't really do anything with it. Fantastic, because people really get immersed in that emotionally, and you can do a lot of things there that you can't do on a square range. So that's kind of how I like to try to do it. So, but even just talking about it, having a discussion about possibilities, if folks are taught to consider other options in using deadly force, then I believe they're more likely to be able to recognize other options than to use deadly force if they are available to them. And in turn, if they are left with no other choice because of their training, they were recognized, or they were looking for other options. Therefore, if they're not available, maybe their judge or their lawyer can articulate that for them. They're less likely to be charged or convicted.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, you concluded it nicely. They already have considered that and can articulate, Your Honor, I was looking for other options. They didn't exist. Maybe to Matt or Clint, if you want to pick it back up again, how often do you train people to not shoot? Because we always train to shoot, right? It's like we're presuming that the bad thing is happening and we want to discharge rounds accurately under duress, but like it's not always the case.
Absolutely. So I think to touch on what Clint talked about, that visualization is huge, right? You got to visualize that it's going to happen. You don't know what you don't know. And, just like Clint, I'll try to take news stories and I'll put news stories that have happened, especially local news stories, and then videos. If I have videos like from Active Self-Protection, John Correa, interject them, have them watch that. And then some different things I've come up with, the MVP of tools. And then we talk about the crime pyramid and other different ways to be able to look over the situation to make sure that what decisions you're going to make. A new acronym I came up with is RFISO, retreat, force, imminent, subjective, objective. So retreat, what level of force? Okay, imminent. And then subjectively is, did you act appropriately? And objectively, the jury is going to decide whether they believe you did. So RFISO, an acronym that I came up with, basically culminating what USCCA, John Correa, and Andrew Branca all have. They all have their own version of that. I wanted to make it a little bit more streamlined, smaller, and with an acronym to make it easy for people to remember, because it's, as we are Americans, lazy. We like acronyms, bulleted lists. And
you can put on a t-shirt too, Matt.
I could, RFISO. But relate the known to the unknown, like they teach in the NRA, relating something that they don't know. Vehicles are huge. I always like to relate vehicles. When you have people that say, "Oh, I'm not going to carry pepper spray. What do I need pepper spray for?" Well, then I tell them about a student of mine who was trying to introduce a square peg into a round hole. He had a situation where he had a gun on him, but he was trying to figure out how he could use the gun, and he wasn't justified in using the gun. And he just stood there going, and he was, not moving, not doing anything. And that could have been detrimental because he was trying to figure out how he could introduce the gun and he couldn't. So then, I'll basically say, what would you do without a gun? And that morphed into MVP of tools. There's some places we go where we don't have any weapons. We can't have anything. It's just our mind, like Clint said, right? We got to MacGyver our way out of it. Our voice, we have to verbalize, make that bad guy think that we have something or that we're a force to be reckoned with. And you might be shitting your pants. It doesn't matter. They don't need to know that. All you need to know is make them believe that you are going to to fight them or can beat them. And that might be enough to thwart that effort. And then the physical, I mean, being able to know how the body works, the defensive tactics aspect, the pressure points, the body goes where the head goes, that kind of thing. That stuff could be beneficial because typically bad guys want to get up close and personal and put hands on you, or at least get close enough to shove a gun in your rib cage. And at that point, that's too late. You're not pulling a gun at that point. And if you do, most likely they're going to take the gun from you. So having those, that forethought, being able to keep people at a distance, ask them, put your hand up the international sign for stop, get them to stop at a distance, kind of qualify. You don't really care why they're coming in your direction. Tell them if they come closer, tell them to stay back, to use that verbal aspect of it, and then make them with whatever tools appropriate for the situation. If people just carry a gun, that's like walking around with a hammer, only expecting to run into nails. That first screw you run into, you're screwed. That's what you got, the wrong tool for the job. I mean, people that aren't carrying, pepper spray, a flashlight. I mean, you can use a flashlight as a Kubotan. You can strobe somebody with it to blind them, to throw them off, right? A tactical pen. I fly with a flashlight and a tactical pen everywhere I go. Tactical pen and a flashlight, because I can't have my gun on the plane with me. I can't have my pepper spray on the plane with me, right? I got my MVP of tools, mind, voice, and physical. And then if I can, those external tools like a flashlight and a tactical pen. But
to your point though, Matt, I mean, I would rather someone have the gun as opposed to nothing. I would rather have the flashlight as opposed to nothing. But they need to understand that, as you said, the whole hammer and nail thing, that's an absolute true thing. So the gun may not be the ultimate answer for every problem that comes along our way. But we can't discount thousands of Americans every day produce a firearm and the intent to defend themselves, and bad guys walk.
Yep.
No, we can't count on that. That would be true folly to count on that. We can't discount it either. But if people are going to be better, well-rounded, and stacking the deck much more in their favor to survive all those damages, it absolutely is in their best interest to have other alternatives with them. Plus, they can articulate, because they had it, they were looking for other options than using deadly force. And if one pops up, they can use the pepper spray. And if it doesn't, well, they're in a better chance to defend themselves legally.
I think I've heard a percentage in the industry of 80-20. 80% of the encounters are simple assaults. I think John Correa might have said this. Todd Fossey might have also said this. 80-20. 20% of the time you're justified in using a firearm. 80% of the time you're not. Okay, so if that's, and the analogy I'll use in a class is, who here, as far as carrying any weapons, any tools, who here puts their seatbelt on? And then hands start going up. I'm like, yeah, as you're getting in a car accident. What the heck? Right? And I'm like, you put a seatbelt on in preparation for a potential car accident you hope you never have, and you don't know when that's going to happen. You carry a gun and other tools for a potential violent encounter or just unsavory encounter with another human being that you hope you never have. Simple as that. You can't pick when it's going to happen, right? You go outside and you're looking, oh, it's snowing out. I'm going to take the vehicle that drives better in the snow. You're not going to say, well, I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to get no gunfight today. I'm just going to carry my gun. I mean, who does that, right? So sometimes you got to think.
If you knew you were going to get jacked up at the gas station tonight, you wouldn't go to the
go to the gas station. Exactly.
So one of the things I'm noticing here is this is something Matt and I have happen all the time.
Sorry, we're taking over your show, guys.
We have guests that come on, and
this is literally why we have you here.
No, I get that.
It's the easiest show on the planet. I'm fascinated. And
pull the string. Pull the string.
And you don't get a chance to talk about what's going on. I saw an email the other day, and I've not had a chance to read it. Walk the Talk America came out with their report, their data report from the surveys and stuff. Mm-hmm. I didn't get a chance to read them. So would you give us the 10,000-foot view on what the findings were?
I think so. To me, nothing really was shocking, right? And the reason why we do that is I attend so many events that are like research or mental health centric or suicide prevention centric, and some of the statistics that like these people throw out when I'm on stage on a panel are ridiculous, right? Like ridiculous to my world. And I always tell them that because I'm like, I live in a different world than this person does, apparently, where 90% of gun owners believe in some sort of gun control, because I live in the SHOT Show world. I live in the NRA world, right? I live in a world where it's like, no, almost 100%. Like we can walk down the aisles and talk. So like, that's how the idea came to like start collecting this data. But what it's kind of turned into now is almost a challenge for me. I went to this research conference, a couple months ago that was in Seattle. And listening to these researchers talk about this insane budget that they have, like, we need $3 million to ask gun owners this question. And I'm like, no, like,
Right.
now granted, I admit that by standards of like real research, this is not right. Like there's ways to do this, but what I wanted to do is kind of inspire researchers to look at Walk the Talk America and say, well, man, he got 2,500 gun owners to like fill this questionnaire out, because that's one of the things that they have an issue with, is like, we can't get gun owners to trust us. And I'm like, of course nobody trusts you, because nobody thinks you're going to do something good with the information. They think you're all going to use it against us. But my confidence is, I don't freaking care what information you come up with or what the data says. I can make an argument now why Walk the Talk America is important. Like, I fear no data. You know what I mean? Like, if you tell me like, oh, these incidents are happening, I'm like, well, that's why you need Walk the Talk America there. So it's kind of like this nice space to crawl in. And here's the irony of this whole thing. Everyone shit on it. I'm talking about researchers. Oh, you're not doing this correctly. You're not doing that the right way. Okay. All right. We're still going to do it. 2,500 people. Every single researcher the last couple of days that I've met in Seattle has hit me up. Oh, I'm excited to look at this. I'm like, now you're excited to look at it?
You're the belle of the ball now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, the methodology, admittedly, is low grade. I'm not going to say it's poor, because we did control for certain things. We did require people to register. You couldn't answer twice unless you put in a second email address, which, like, who goes that far? But it was a survey. It was a self-select internet survey, right? That's not what in the science community we would consider high fidelity. But you cannot argue that N of 2483 is very large. And what it revealed to us is, and to Mike, it's no surprise, but I want to share my screen here so the viewing audience can at least see some of what I've got. I'm going to start. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I'm going to start with the mental health section. So I'm going to scroll up here. It's mental health, right? We're on page 18. So have you ever received mental health services? 79% said no, right? 6% said yes currently. And then 10% said yes, but more than 5 years ago. So, like, we're talking 8 out of 10. There's your 80-20 split, right? 80-20 split. 79% said no. Would you, if you have received mental health services or would receive them in the future, what's your interest? Individual, couples, family, right? Seems like that's the breakout we would expect. Yep. What's your perception of mental health professionals in general? This one surprised me a little bit. So from very negative to very positive, we have a distribution that looks something like a graphic equalizer with the base turned down. So the very negative 1 through 4 is only 300 people of that 2,400, and then the rest are 5 and above. So with almost 400 answering 10, 200 answering 9, 460 answering 8. So they do have a positive perception of us, which is nice. Then there's a question about if you took a screening, how likely would you be to seek out services? But this is the big one. So we have some data from a New York State, your people, Matt, New York State survey of only a couple hundred folks that I recently presented on. It suggests that these people who are surveyed in this treatment facility, so they're already in care, 200 and something of them. They asked them if it was possible that getting mental health services would result in them being reported to their county and thereby losing their firearm rights. 9% said they'd be less likely to seek services. Okay, so that's people already in care, which means we already have a sampling bias issue where, like, these people who are already in care, which means they would go to care, 9% of those said, no, I would be less likely to seek care if I thought that I'd have my rights taken away. Well, here's our survey results. It's 50-50. 50% of people would be more hesitant to seek out professional mental health services if there's an extreme risk protection order or red flag law in their state. If we extrapolate that to the 107 million gun owners in America, you're talking 52, 53 million people who would purposely avoid care. Now, I don't know if this is representative of the gun owning population, but it's definitely more than we ever had, which is that one single survey out of New York State. The other thing that's surprising to me, I guess maybe not surprising, but 60% of people said they don't support ERPOs. 40% said yes. That was a little surprising. I don't know if we can cross-reference this to see what people's understanding of it, really is. But then if I keep scrolling, are you supportive of background checks? So there's this group called 97%. .org, and they say that 97% of Americans are supportive of background checks. Well, here's our results. 11% said no, and 41% said yes for new purchases only, and 48% said yes for all purchases and transfers. So either way, we're not at 97%. And so this organization that's continuing to push gun control, which is the 97% organization, that's off. At bare minimum, we're looking at 11% say no, not under any circumstance should we ever have background checks. So it's not 3%. And at maximum, we're talking half, right? We're talking half of gun owners don't think background checks should be implemented for anything but new purchases. So
real quick on that. Do you think that that is because, you think about it like, you're in you live in a bad city and you're like, well, this is just how it is. We just got to deal with it. Do you think that that's part of that? Like, because we have background checks, gun owners are like, well, I've done it. It's not that bad. And maybe it does help. Or do you think it's truly deep down? Because in some sense, I think like they got like is it Munchausen syndrome where you're in a bad relationship where you don't want to get out because it's like, well, I'm used to him beating the crap out of me now. Is that what that was?
Stockholm syndrome is what
Stockholm.
that is. Munchausen's
right?
is when you keep yourself sick to get some advantage. And then Munchausen's by proxy, which we now know is fictitious disorder imposed on another. It's different language.
Gotcha,
but that's when you keep somebody else sick for your own gain.
Glad you guys are on top of that. But so the Stockholm syndrome, in that sense, do you think that's kind of how we are? We're in Stockholm syndrome where we're so used to background checks that we're just like, well, it's, we're doing it. Let's just keep doing it.
Yeah. People will protect what they know a lot of times. And if that's all they know, then they think, oh, well, this must be here for a good reason. I mean, with red flag laws, I like to equate that to like Patriot Act. Most people, if you quiz them, do you think Patriot Act is a good idea or was it a good idea? And a lot of people, especially those that went through that at the time, are like, yeah, wow, that's great. But, has Patriot Act thwarted some terrorist attacks? Yeah, I think probably it has. Matter of fact, speaking with law enforcement, I know that it has. But the
what do you give
the infringement of the rights and liberties of the country, the entire population of the United States, is that been worth it for that? That's the rub right there. I'm actually writing an article right now about comparing red flag laws to the fugitive slave law, which is actually very, very interesting and may upset a few people, maybe not.
I'd like to hear about that a little bit more offline because I've been doing this for 5 years, ever since Nevada implemented its own red flag law in January of 2020. And to my knowledge, I'm the only mental health practitioner who even knows what it is, like properly inside and out. And I've studied across multiple states. But back to Matt's question, I think my opinion is, yes, I don't know if it's necessarily like the downtrodden being kept in a subservient role by the person who's holding them hostage, so much as it is just the way we do things, right? I analogize that to a lot of people who, unfortunately or fortunately, they're working in the federal government right now, and DOJ is coming in and kicking in the door and questioning the existence of many programs, whether they're grant funded or funded through, general fund or whatever. They're saying, what do you do here? They're becoming the Bobs from Office Space. Like, what would you say you do here? Can you substantiate and articulate your existence on taxpayer dollars? And people are freaking out. And I think it's because they've been doing it for so long, and they've been telling themselves that their work matters, that to see it any other way is threatening to their identity as a human being, because they've conflated who they are with what they do for work. So one of the things I regularly harp on is, don't confuse who you are with what you do. If your job ends tomorrow, or you have to retire, or you just choose to retire, who are you beyond your occupation? Who are you beyond your hobbies? If guns went away tomorrow and you two as instructors had to go make ends meet some other way, could you? Probably, yes. But we
Yeah,
want to
that's
be
something.
non-attached to these things. We want to hold loosely to these things. So similarly, we have the same type of psychological influence when something has been in place forever and ever and ever, and you just go along to get along, and you just tuck your head and you just
Right.
keep it moving, right? And yeah, background checks are probably one of those things. We can have a reasonable debate about the effectiveness of them, but we got to ask the right questions. Similarly, we can have a reasonable debate about red flag laws, but we got to ask the right questions. So part of our research, if you can call it that, it's a survey, is to ask better questions. Because right now, the only research being funded is by gun control organizations like Bloomberg and Moms Demand. And they ask questions like, do the existence of red flag laws in a particular state lower firearm suicides? And the answer is usually yes. However, they do not lower all suicides because in every state in the country, suicides have gone up everywhere. So, what was the goal of the red flag law? If the goal of the red flag law was to prevent unnecessary death, you have failed.
Yep.
If the goal was to prevent firearm suicides, okay, maybe we can congratulate. However, we have not tracked how many people you repelled from care with the existence of this law, which we just demonstrated 50% of gun owners would do. They would avoid care if this law exists where they live. And now we have to ask, how many people got worse? And can we measure that? Now, we can measure it in suicides. That's the worst outcome. Can we measure it in divorces? Can we measure it in addiction? Can we measure it in overdoses? By people who refuse to go into care because they did not want to lose their firearm rights. And for the people who are listening going, oh, whatever, gun rights, who cares, right? It's like, okay, you've never been in a situation where you depended upon that tool to defend your life or the life of others, say in domestic violence survivor incidents. I'm not comfortable making that argument on behalf of somebody else to say you're not allowed to have this because you simply asked for help for an illness. That we would never do that anywhere else. We don't ban people from their firearms because they break their wrist. Oh, sorry, you can't shoot. Therefore, we got to take your guns away because you're deemed unsafe. It's like, this is not at all okay, and we have to ask better questions, which means we need better research, and we're trying to be the tip of the spear on that. Because again, like Mike says, I'm not afraid of data. If the data come out and show that ERPOs are maximally effective across all domains, and we're reducing deaths, all right, cool. I guess that's what our data tell us, but that's not what the data are telling us, and they're asking the wrong questions.
Well, and also too, like we would lean right into that and be like, okay, that so be it. Here's the fears that gun owners have. Let's make these better, right? Like if I could go back, Matt and Clint, I Walk the Talk America. This wouldn't have worked, but I would have named it Walk Fucking 3 Feet Over There. Like literally, that's what I would have named Walk the Talk America, because I ran into so many people that work in this space that all they want to do is talk about the same shit all the time. They want to act like these things are working while Jake will tell you the data is telling us different. Like we're losing this battle, and they want to do toolkits and things like that, which are fine. I'm not here to like crap on a good toolkit. You know what I mean? Like it can work for people, but it's like we're stuck in the same thing. Like all the governor's challenge. I'm probably screwing myself here, Jake. All the governor's challenge
Nobody listens
meetings
to us.
and the mayor. Yeah, that's right. Your 2 listeners that you brought to the table. No, and the mayor's challenge is all that stuff is a complete circle jerk, waste of time. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot of issues here. I mean, like talking about red flag laws, and Matt, you might be able to appreciate this because you're still in law enforcement. But I remember like when it happened here, I was having some lunch with Vegas PD guys, and they randomly found me, online through Walk Talk America, and they were like, "Hey, we'd like to invite you out." And they were really cool. They were just trying to see what we could offer, and I remember they were like, "We're not going to enforce these laws. Like, this is ridiculous." They're like, "You're sending me into a situation where it's already hostile to go take somebody's firearm." Like,
sure.
It's causing a problem on top of a problem, right? Like it's a powder keg situation that they're not even comfortable with, and the ambiguity of the law and things like that. It's really, I mean, be interested to kind of hear your take on it, Matt, because first of all, side note, like we're in a weird space with you, right? Like you're a gun guy, you're a cop. There's a lot of gun people that are like, I'm a patriot, and then bootlickers and all that.
Jackboot of
and then the
society.
states-
I hate
Stepping on my neck.
The Massachusetts State Police Department does look like they're about to march into Eastern Europe, though. If you look at their uniforms, check that out. It's actually wow.
New York State Troopers a little too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but
Yeah,
Matt,
I mean-
there has to be a certain amount of eye rolling you do when you're in a comment
Absolutely.
section, right? Okay.
yeah, I mean, I try not to respond, and every once in a while I will respond. And it's just like you see somebody that, pulls somebody over, and then that individual ends up not complying, and they pull him out of the car, and then they end up trying to go for the gun, and the officer shoots him, and oh, he just got shot because he got pulled over. No, he got shot because he was going for the officer's gun. Oh, you're a bootlicker. Okay, whatever. So, and just so people understand, 922G of the federal law is what covers what the barring statutes are, when you can't have guns or ammunition. A lot of people don't even know ammunition is part of that. And in there is those emergency risk protection orders, or red flag. So ERPO's a red flag, which lists and details, if it's if you're harassing, stalking, or threatening an intimate partner or a credible threat, then a judge can issue that ERPO. I think there's already stuff in the laws that allows law enforcement to be able to take people's guns. I was having breakfast with a sheriff, this probably 5 or 6 years ago when this first started happening. And I asked him, I said, so 22 years as a sheriff, he was deputy, and now he's the actual sheriff of the county. And I said, have you ever had a situation where you could have used an ERPO, red flag? And he's like, yeah, there was this one situation. A pizza driver pulls into the guy's driveway. Guy comes out with a shotgun. Guy pulls out, calls police, show up, and they were at a standoff. And then they finally talked him down, got him out of the house. They went into the house, and there was loaded guns at each window, in each door. Like he had got multiple, like an arsenal, all over his house, at the windows, ready for a war. Suffering with PTSD, came back from the war, and I was like, "Well, what'd you do?" They go, "Well, we took the guns, and we held the guns until he got released, and we can give him his guns back because we don't want anybody to steal the guns." I'm like, "Okay, so how would have ERPO red flag helped?" He goes, "Good point." Right? Like, what would that have done if he ended up getting incarcerated? Those guns would have stayed in inventory until somebody else took possession of them in his estate or whatever. But there was, ERPO red flag didn't help in that situation. So it's, in some sense, it's like one person arbitrarily, when it comes to ERPO and red flag, it's to decide, I'm going to take your guns. There's a thing called due process. There's a thing called being, the right to be able to face your accuser. There's a thing called a jury of your peers deciding that, not one single person, a judge, right? So and this is the funny thing, due process when it comes to the whole, we got to have due process for people who are, put in prison. What about due process for people who we're trying to take their guns away? I mean,
there's property seizure,
right?
Yeah. There's a lot there, a lot to unpack, and I think a lot of it too is it's political in nature. I mean,
for sure,
the
guns. They don't want guns in hands.
But the guns are one thing we're talking about. If you look at just government in general, now maybe things will start to change here, and then the next midterm we may see some changes at the state level. But largely speaking, government and those that are in control of the narrative are oftentimes demonizing and like doing the whole demagoguery thing with gun owners, with anybody that's self-sufficient for that matter. I mean, look what happened with the parents who were speaking out against folks that were
school boards,
people that stood up and said, no, I'm not going to wear a mask. And, we see a lot of times, hell, try to drill a well on your property and see how quick it takes for the government to crawl up your ass. So anytime we want to be more self-sufficient as individuals, government gets in the way. And the problem is the demagoguery that takes place with separating this whole swath of Americans that happen to own firearms. It causes them to not want to reach out for help and not want to, in some cases, like speak to someone who could give them mental, because they're afraid of the fallback from that. We've talked about this with gun owners voting, and I'm involved with a lot of like pro-gun organizations at the state level and trying to get gun owners to come out and vote. They just don't want to be part of the process. They want to be left alone, and they feel that voting makes them part of the process. So speaking to a mental health person a lot of times makes them feel, I think, as you mentioned earlier, opens them up to all this extra scrutiny that perhaps they're fearful of.
Yeah, and
because
we're not
they've
doing
been-
it.
They've been
We're not
demonized.
doing a good job of separating ourselves from that. One of the things that I learned very early on in my career with some of the quote unquote mandated patients, either through juvenile probation or through adult drug court, was I had to say, I'm not them. I may be housed in the same building, which in my my brain is a design flaw, but I'm here to help you, right? I'm
Right.
not part of the court. I'm not your case management person. I'm not the judge. I'm not your probation officer. I'm here to help you, and everything that comes here is in a vault. I will not tell them anything that doesn't fit into one of the four, exceptions to confidentiality, which is immediate threat to self or others, reports of suspected child abuse or endangerment, elder abuse, handicap abuse. If you give me permission, which is the third one, and if a judge orders me to, which in my entire career, I'm batting 1,000 for staying out of court because the judges know that I can't say shit either. So like outside of those four, I'm not telling them how you got here if you drove on a suspended license, because it's none of their concern. And then once they realize that, they're like, okay, all right, cool. Same with the kids. The kids are like, oh, you're just part of the system because the probation officer and my parents made me come. I'm like, no, nope, no, I'm not. And then once they get that, they're like, okay, cool. Here's the problem though. Our profession has, I don't want to politicize it left, right, but you can't avoid it, right? We are so left, and we love being told what to do, and that is a hallmark of left-leaning folks, is they're not necessarily advocating for individual rights all the time. I think that our professional associations, when something like the state of Colorado goes forward and expands its ERPO law to include us, we just sit on the sidelines because silently we kind of like it. We kind of are in support of that, right? We're not going to go to the legislature and say, whoa, 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 you're putting us into a compromised position here, ethically, legally, morally. And when I say ethically, it's not just the confidentiality stuff. It's the fidelity to the contract we signed with the individual we're treating. The state of Colorado now includes mental health professionals, school counselors, educators, doctors, and other physicians as people who can file a petition with a court. Every other state except for like New York did this too, and with its SAFE Act, because it expanded it with Section 9.46 or whatever. Every other state is law enforcement and family members are usually defined pretty tightly. But now in Colorado, and Washington State's kicking the tires on it too, they've expanded it to all healthcare providers as well as teachers. So now, 2019, I wrote an article for Walk the Talk America right when I first met Mike, and it was entitled "Counselors Cannot Take Your Guns." Now it's not even true. I can actually ask a court now, not in Nevada, but how do I separate myself like I did with those compulsory patients that I was serving 10, 15 years ago? I can't do that anymore because the law literally allows and gives permission to all my peer colleagues. I can make that statement personally as Jake Wiskerson. I can say, bro, that is not my level of intrusion into your life. My level of intrusion, if you're that ill, is to get you a higher level of care. It's not to take your property. That's terrible. Right. And it's not in my purview. But I can't make that promise on behalf of my peer colleagues. So I don't know where we go from here other than, go advocate for these ERPOs not to expand to include us, because it's antithetical. Probably, if I look at Colorado's laws, it's probably in direct contradiction with what they command their medical professionals to do also. But I don't live in Colorado.
It's just one more example of how when government gets involved, things get kind of
yeah. Oh, I'm from the government. I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here in New York, you got like my wife. Yeah. And my wife my wife took our daughter to the doctors, and they're asking on some of the forms. This is years ago, around the SAFE Act time. It's like, hey, do you have any guns in the house? What the hell? What does that mean to you? What? Right. You're not asking me if I have a TV in the house. Do I have a toaster? Do I have a pressure cooker?
Yeah. Do I have cleaning products under the sink?
Yeah, exactly. Bleach and ammonia. What is it? The two you can't mix?
Yeah, Matt, the one thing I cannot understand
is swimming pool.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right? Is there a fence around it?
Yeah.
Knives,
you have gravity.
Yeah. The one thing I don't understand about the New York,
I banned gravity from my house,
and how it just continues to exist is, I run in a lot of circles with like mental health people and even like people from Mental Health America. They're like, no, the New York SAFE Act is horrible. It stigmatizes mental health. So it's like, I feel like we're in some kind of upside down world where I'm like, everybody agrees that this thing is horrible. Why does it why is it still here?
Goes back
Well, I
to
think-
background checks. It's just how we do things, right?
Well, and I think part of it is New York City, I mean, it's New York City is just like, there's like Colorado, you see the stuff in Colorado. You wouldn't have never thought that happened in Colorado, but it's because of Denver and the big cities really push that narrative. And I think in some sense they're in this, this funnel down there in New York City where they think, oh, well, this is good. Yeah, this is what the politicians say. I'm too busy. I can't research it on my own. I'll just go with whatever it says on TikTok or social media. I think the bigger problem, and we're seeing it now more with the prisons in New York State. I just had one of my instructors text me saying that he's on the picket line. They're not supposed to picket, but they're picketing because they're striking because of the deplorable situations inside the prisons here in New York State. Because this governor's inept, the attorney general's inept. They're both literally just saying, well, you got to get back to work. We won't press any charges. We won't do any kind of punishment to you if you go back to work by midnight tonight. Not, well, you're not supposed to. You must be really bad if you're deciding to picket and you're deciding to not go to work. So let's figure out what we can do to make you guys happier, because you are with the worst of the worst, making sure that they're taken care of inside the prison. But they don't see it that way. They're basically threatening them. It's scary. It's scary. The state's scary. We got Pam Bondi now bringing charges against New York State for harboring fugitives. Yay! Now next, hopefully they'll bring stuff against New York State for the whole SAFE Act, the whole Concealed Carry Improvement Act, September of 2022 that they put in to basically offset what the Supreme Court ruled in June of 2022 with the Bruen decision.
Well, what's even more diabolical, you brought up a point that just made me think of this. New York City, you get these people that say these programs are working, and then they'll give a cursory view of data like FBI Uniform Crime Report, and they'll say, look, crime is down. But New York City doesn't report to the FBI Uniform Crime Report. Neither does Chicago and a whole host of other cities. Like almost 40% of cities do not report.
That's why it's down.
Yeah, and in 2021 they went to NIBRS, National Incident Based Reporting System. So if the four of us were in a room and we all got murdered, it wouldn't be 4 murders; it'd be 1 murder event. So I mean, that's diabolical. That happened.
Wow.
So
They're
they'll put
skewing the
out the Uniform Crime Report and say, look, and they'll imply that their programs, look, our programs are working great. Look, crime is down significantly. Yeah, it's not.
They're fudging
not
them.
at all.
Yep.
What's the point? Control, evil?
Yes,
I mean,
control.
like,
Years ago, I used to say that. I used to say, like, do they really want the guns, or are they really worried about keeping people safe? And then I've come to the conclusion that they just absolute power corrupts absolutely. And they want to keep their power. And they know that if people are armed, then they can't push everything that they want to push. I mean, look at the stuff that that Doge is uncovering when it comes to, the USAID and all these organizations, and the billions and billions and trillions of dollars is misappropriated and lost and goes to foreign entities, yet they're not giving money to California or North Carolina when we have a natural disaster here in the United States. It's sickening. And I think that's the light of everything. Yeah.
If I may, you ready for this?
Yep.
A free American has nothing to fear from an armed and educated citizenry. Only a tyrant has to fear from an armed and educated citizenry.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference. And so I kind of look at it that way. If you are for stifling the rights of your fellow Americans, then that is a red flag right there. Yep. If you're for helping people to grow, develop, and pursue their happiness and enjoy the liberty that is definitely guaranteed to us, liberty is there. Our rights are there. The Constitution actually stops the government from monkeying with it. That's the point. But if there's a politician, especially that espouses the restriction or limitation of the rights of their fellow Americans, then that's a red flag to me. That person must have a mindset of tyranny or tyranny. That's the only explanation that I've been able to find. Yeah,
and we know that across time, right? We see people in positions of power and authority take it to extremes because they can never be satiated. So the question becomes, well, what's up with the people who support him? What's up with the flying monkeys carrying water for the tyrants? Because ultimately, don't they just get tyrannized also?
Lenin has a name called Useful Idiots, doesn't he? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, Useful Idiots, Flying Monkeys, to draw from Wizard of Oz. so I could do a whole podcast on cluster B personality disorders, including narcissism and sociopathy. But you look downstream a little bit and you go, well, what's up with the people who are elevating these people? Who are the ones who are the apologists, who are like opposing the revealing of all the fraud, for example? It's like, what's up with you? And I think it has something to do with wanting to be in proximity with the elites. The counter elites are fighting it. They're saying, we're done with this. We're tax-paying citizens. We don't want our money going to bad places. We don't want policies that restrict our freedoms. And then the people who are not a part of the counter elites, they're kind of elite adjacent, but they know they're not in that echelon, and they're going to be the first ones to get stamped out.
Yeah.
But they want to align themselves in such a way that they protect themselves. They mitigate their risk. So I think that's what's going on here. Is I see commoners trying to carry water for the elites who are rubbing our noses in it and trying to squash freedom, and they think that they're going to be insulated, and they just aren't. That doesn't echo across history. In fact, usually those are the first people shot.
You see this a lot of times in the film and music industry. You'll get an asshole actor and you have their entourage, and he'll treat his assistant like dirt, but the assistant will justify it and say, well, he's such an artist and it's such an honor to be around him. I think maybe you're right. It could be some of that.
Wow.
Also, people
Sycophants.
generally protect what they know. Like you could go into, like, again, not to be partisan, but a lot of democratically controlled cities have a whole lot of things going wrong with them. You could go in and point that out to people that have voted Democrat their whole life, but as soon as you show them the folly of their local elected officials that also have the D next to them, they voted D their whole life. At some point, if you push too hard, they'll protect what they know. Because
that's an ego defense for sure. And I've seen the same stuff play out on Twitter the last few weeks when people are pointing out that the Republicans in Congress were the ones who signed off and rubber stamped on the spending bills that are sending money overseas. And they're like, whoa, yeah, I can't argue that. Yeah. So let's not get into, tribalism.
Well, you got to sign it before you read it, right?
So we know what's in it.
No, it's got to come out before you can read it. Is that how that worked? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Hollywood, Clint, and what was happening with Weinstein back then. Remember that whole it came out that there's the casting couch. I mean, that's a real thing.
Casting couch in film school, like,
right?
Even Bob's Correspondence Film School that you can pay $10 out of the back of a magazine. They have a module on casting couch. That's
right. So, I mean, and you think about it, that's kind of the same concept. Like, well, it's just the thing I got to do. I got to sleep with this person to get a job because
got to deal with it. Yeah,
right. You got to deal with it. It's just the way it is. I mean, it's. This
I'm not saying it's right.
No, right. Yeah, exactly.
To those listening, no, see what I'm doing.
I'm just I'm trying to say that there's a lot of these similarities in the movie industry with politicians, even in the sports industry, where it's kind of commonplace that kind of stuff's got to happen in order for them to get ahead, and it's sickening. It's a mental disorder.
Do they have to sleep with a coach? Is that how that works?
Well,
I mean, Olympics. You hear about the Olympics?
Larry Nassar,
yeah,
same thing.
The gymnast. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's really interesting how people can. So, like, one of the things that came out of you guys will probably find this really interesting. The research conference, right? It's a fascinating place to be because you literally, like, there's like 800 researchers, and there was like me, Pincus. Bill Broussard.
Pincus is in the chat, by the way.
Oh,
there's a Pincus side.
Yeah. Rob was the greatest guy to watch. Just the way I can describe it was like releasing a tiger in a deer habitat.
Yeah,
where it was only like 15 feet by because Rob's not going to let you say dumb shit and not say something when Rob and the running joke was, when is Rob speaking at the event? And it's like every hour and a half in the question and answer line. But like, I was sitting in one conference and they were talking about, firearms are the number one killer in the youth, right? And they defined youth as they took out 0 to 1, which doesn't make any sense to me because I'm like, babies can't accidentally be shot, and then it went 1 to 19. So I had a huge problem with that because I'm like, since when is a 19-year-old a kid, a child? Now, granted,
Right.
they might mentally be, right? Like,
I know some
I
50-year-olds that are child.
hey, listen, I'm from New Jersey. I call like 35-year-old men kids. Like, he's a good
Yeah.
kid, like,
For
but
sure.
my thing with the issue there is they were picking and choosing what was an adult. So they were making an argument that only military trained 18-year-olds should be able to carry or have these guns. But then one door over, they're saying a 19-year-old gangbanger from Chicago is a child. And they're not, their brain's not built to be able to protect themselves or have guns. Right. So, I'm trying to tell them we have a huge moral compass issue in the United States, and they're all like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You're calling a 19-year-old a child, but we're all in this room accepting that we can send a 19 or an 18-year-old off to do porno. We could send them overseas with a machine gun and kill people. We could let them work at a strip club. We think that they can
let them
vote.
get a sex change.
We can let them get a sex change. We let them vote. Like, we say they're an important voice in voting, but then we say that they're like little idiots that we got to protect them. Like, and every time I would bring that up, they couldn't get out of that conversation fast enough, man. It was like, oh my God, my foot is bleeding. I just cut my foot inside my shoe. The old Romeo and Michelle, like, it's filling up with blood. I gotta go this.
There's more to that though. There's a local place, and I don't want to bag on them because they do great work, but a local place here that does some gathering of youth, and they call youth through age 24. So homeless youth, right? Oh, all right, cool. Like, you can't grab kids because they're underage and they're in a different part of the system. But if you're homeless and you're a young adult, that's fine. But they call it youth. They call it youth to age 24.
I mean,
and then
with the Obamacare, they expect
ACA to 26, you can be on insurance. And then in South Dakota, you can drive at 14. And in Nevada, you can have consensual sex at 16. So we're all over the map on this stuff. So, like, one consensual, or one consensus on what constitutes an adult would be nice.
Well, it all comes back to their, fitting their narrative, right? I mean, in anything, any industry, we do that. We'll skew numbers, we'll stretch things, move things around for marketing and advertising. But at what point does it become disingenuous? What point does it
policy?
Yeah. Right. Well, for sure. That's kind of what I'm getting. Exactly. That's what I'm getting to, is like, at some point there's certain things that you need to be as close to, like, you do that on your taxes, right? I mean, they're going to come down on you. So there's certain things you have to be morally and ethically sound on and make sure you can back up the numbers and be good on. And that's one thing that they definitely need to be a little bit better on. So you're right. They need to have a set age.
Ultimately, the system, whether that be the government, the elites, the Illuminati, whatever it is that controls things, they're cherry picking who gets to enjoy life and experience and exercise their rights, which is not the right way to go about it. Liberty is really, really sometimes kind of yucky and dirty. Everyone should have equal opportunity under the law, and we should all be able to exercise our God-given or natural born or self-evident rights. And it shouldn't be up to a person somewhere, some legislator, some pundit, somebody to decide who can exercise those rights. And the system we have set up now really kind of helps to segregate people into these different classes, these different, gun owning people versus the purple people versus the green. And I think we've lost quite a bit when we've stepped away from just like, hey, we're all Americans first, and we all have these just basic rights that the government is forbidden from touching. And then let's see how we as a community can help one another out when we, are impoverished, or when we, need mental health help, if we need, help with raising our child, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
So we've so dependent upon government that we've lost touch with our own individual communities.
I want to go back to that conversation we were having earlier about why people just keep doing things because it's the way they've been doing them. There's something called ego defensiveness in our field, and unfortunately, I grabbed my DSM-4. It's out of date now. They switched to the DSM-5 in 2013, and what they did is they plucked a section from here and they didn't print it in the 5, having to do with defensive functioning. It's a psychodynamic approach that nobody teaches anymore. It's hard, but it's very good. We don't hear about psychodynamic psychotherapy anymore. We hear about behavioral therapies because they're easily monitored, and they're well funded, and you can quantify the results a lot easier, right? Well, here's the problem. When we get away from that, when my field gets away from that, and all those terms like help rejecting complaining and displacement and sublimation and repression and suppression, they lose meaning because they're no longer defined in the book of the trade. We lack the explanation for why people continue to do things. And this goes to systems as well. So if I've just always relied on government to do governmental things, then I'm not interested in changing it. I don't really know how. It's just because it's super comfortable to me. And I don't mean comfortable as in like fun and useful, but like predictable and familiar. So it's easier to stay there, even if it's not great for me, even if it's miserable, because the fear of the unknown, the fear of challenging, the fear of going up against the rest of the people who are comfortable is more powerful than the misery of the present. So my invitation to people listening, if you want to make change, whether it's in your personal life, systemically, in a community, you have to find some courage. And courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is seeing fear and doing the thing anyway, in spite of the potential blowback you might incur, in spite of the potential friends you might lose, but maybe they weren't friends to begin with. And you have to push through that ego comfort to do the right thing, because ego will just leave you where you are and you'll never grow. If you really want to grow, you got to challenge yourself. You got to challenge convention. You got to challenge the rules. It doesn't mean you got to go in like swinging fists like a jerk, but you have to know how to do it and to do it at all. You don't get to sit there and keep complaining like, oh, Colorado doesn't let, included mental health therapists in their ERPO law. What am I supposed to do? It's like you're supposed to go down and speak at the legislature and say, this is bad. Put your name on the record, right? That's what you're supposed to do. In my realm, I have to do podcasts, right? I have to get this information out. I have to invite people to challenge. So if you're listening, find the courage. Don't just chip your teeth in your private salons. Like, go out and do bold things and try to make change, and know that there's a reason that you stay comfortable. It's your ego defense. And we got a whole podcast on this called Being Defensive or something, but
that's awesome.
One thing, the New York State Corrections Officers, one of my instructors that I mentioned earlier, he texted me, he goes, day 4 on the line, find me some work, LOL. He goes, lost 8 days of pay so far. We get fined 2 days of pay for every day they are out. And I asked him if you come on the show to talk about it, Clint. He goes, we can't speak to the media. I could feed you info to talk about, though. So, inside information is something that he's willing to do, but they're literally on the line and they're losing for every day they're not in the job doing the job. And this comes down to New York State saying they got the HALT Act, where they're not allowing inmates that are doing bad things to be put in solitary confinement as a punishment. No, that's not no. But yet they're in there. There's literally, I saw a post earlier from a friend of mine, there's hangings happening now because there's no corrections officers inside the prison. So the prisoners are literally going around stabbing each other, hanging each other, throwing guards. National Guard's been called in. There's National Guard at some of the prisons to take up the spots for the corrections officers. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're talking about, right? I mean, it's sad that they have to do that, but they have to do something to get the point across to the state. The deplorable situations that these guards are in, that these corrections officers are put in because of this governor.
These are human
smokes,
beings.
Matt. Imagine how much worse it would be if people could have more than 10 rounds in a magazine.
Yeah, right. For sure. You were saying, Jake?
I was saying these are humans beings who are citizens of that state ostensibly, and the elected leadership just doesn't care that they die. Like, how bad of optics must it get before you actually take action? Like, how bad is that person's ego? How fragile are you as an individual that you're not willing to make changes because something political angle somewhere? Like, that blows my mind.
But that's a cross section of the citizenry that those in power, whoever they are, have deemed not important.
Correct. Yeah, they're lessers. Well, that's a nice place to end.
Yeah, you know what though? I could talk to you guys. You guys got to come back, because I feel like there's so much we didn't talk about, and I know people's attention span. We figured it out. It's between an hour and a half here, But we'd love to have you guys back on, because there's some stuff I still want to talk to you guys about, and we didn't even touch on all the crazy stories you guys probably have from guests and situations that you've been in. So open invitation to come back anytime. But
we'd love to.
Yeah, one question that I got to ask you guys, because we always ask it on the way out, is and you figure out who's going to go first, but how do you tend to your mental health?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
I have, and I'll say this in my classes, and Michael, I'll put this out to my students for the Walk Talk America, let them know about you guys and everything. Have that thing that calms you down, that thing, that Zen moment. Personally, I'll say, like, if I'm sitting on the computer, I'm getting frustrated, and I just know I want to break the computer, and I know reasonably I can't do that. I'll just be like, all right, I got to get up, I got to move. I can feel it boiling up inside of me. I'll put the computer down. I'll go out and work on the chickens, the bees. I'll go down to the pond and feed the fish. I'll go to the waterfalls, go to the range and shoot. I'll go in the garden. I'll try to find something manly, put my hands in the dirt, kind of thing, or vice versa. I'm out doing that and I'm frustrated and it's not going my way. I hit myself in the thumb with a hammer, whatever. I'll go in, clean up, have lunch, or hop on my computer. So I have the luxury of usually most of the time being able to change my scenery. Some people don't have that. So maybe they got to have that other Zen thing, music, or somebody they talk to, or, like her 9-year-old daughter, her little stuffy animals, whatever. It'd be weird for an adult to have a stuffy animal, but hey, I'm not judging. So that's me.
Yeah, I am in a very fortunate position in life where God has put a lot of really, really good acquaintances and friends in my path. And I have folks like Matt and Rob, Pincus, he's on the line. Maybe a handful of other folks that I know that I could come to and talk about things. I got to tell you, the Walk Talk America bracelet, there have been times I felt really kind of low for whatever reason or overwhelmed, and I see that on there. And not that I've reached out to you, Michael, but I certainly know that there are avenues out there for me to seek help. Recently, a family member of mine, we had to seek out help, and one of my very close acquaintances also owns a practice, and he is one of the most pro-gun clinical psychologists in Western Pennsylvania. So in having my family member go speak to his son, actually, I was able to, learn a little bit more about that process and feel much more comfortable if I felt that I needed to actually go sit down and talk with him. So, I think figuring out who you can speak to, the folks that you can go to, personally, I do pray. And I believe God's listening. That may not be everyone's cup of tea, but being able to just thoughtfully vent and talk about things is very important. But having an outlet, like Matt said, I come from a creative background. I do a podcast with my son. Matt and we have a podcast here, so I can really dedicate just power into that. And that helps to diffuse a lot of times the negativity that might be welling up in the back recesses of my soul. But yeah, having a creative outlet's a big deal. I know guys that like paint models, they play guitar. I think having a hobby is a very, very good thing to do. Luckily, most of my hobbies also help to put food on my table too. And I get to spend time with my kid. So that's also pretty awesome.
Good answers. Although I am a little curious why Matt would go out and hit himself in the thumb with a hammer to alleviate stress. But
no, that would cause the stress.
Thank you guys. We really appreciate the time being made. And DJ Play Nice says part 2 for sure. So apparently we need to do part 2 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Super. Love it.
We appreciate it, and keep up the good work. And where can people find you?
MeetThePressers.com. That links to both Clint and I's training companies and everything else we do.
Yeah, it's a good place to catch us both and everything that we do right through that website. Meet the Pressers, Pressers. Meet, MEET. Not like we discussed
the Pressers.
Not the Pressors. Yeah. No. MeetThePressers.com.
And that's on all social media platforms. Meet the Pressers.
And Active Self-Protection Unlimited.
Yep.
And
we're on the
Roku.
Unlimited app. Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.
And it'll be stuck in your mind for days once you hear the theme song, just like Baby Shark.
Thanks, everybody. On behalf of our entire Walk the Talk America family, we wish you all great mental wellness. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.